I'm going to make an assumption, and I may be wrong. Does anybody here think that we're going to survive without some type of event that's going to negatively impact our country?
So you're calling for optimists.
Any optimists?
AKA fool.
Now, we've been hearing a lot of talk lately about a coup, a soft coup, the deep state. I mean, personally, I think we've had a soft coup, and the reason I say it is because of all the things that I read on the news. I don't watch a lot of the news. The only thing I do watch, and I'll give a shout out to him, is Hannity. Now, what I do is I tape him, and if Geraldo's on, I quick fast forward through that. I've actually started to fast forward through his opening monologues. It's the same thing over and over. All last week we went through pretty fast, except the last issue. If it was a Kavanaugh-related issue, we zip forward, fast forward. The one night we watched 5 minutes, that way everything else was Kavanaugh. I don't want to talk about that. What I want to talk about, the start is, did we already, was the soft coup successful? And I believe they were, to a large degree. And I even hate to think what would have happened if Hillary had won. So I'm going to throw this first question to Peter. Do you ever think about how we would be right now if Hillary would have won?
In deadly seriousness, I talked to my stepdaughter the week before the election, and I told her that if she didn't hear from me, it was either because I couldn't make a call or I was dead. And I've been her second dad for 34 years. And you could tell by the silence that what do you say when someone says that? So I did think about that a lot. I don't think there would be anything but open conflict in the U.S. had Hillary been elected. That's what I was expected, and that's why I say what I said to my stepdaughter.
And I think there actually is open conflict right now between what you can call the deep state or whatever appellation you want to give to it, and the media is complicit. But let's say that they have won or their voters won. Think about these things I wrote about a week and a half ago. Do you think the presumption of innocence until proven guilty is a basic tenet in our country yet?
No.
I mean, that was pretty much proven under the Kavanaugh hearing.
Just by the media.
Is there a two-tiered justice system in our country?
Yes.
I think Tom's presentation kind of segued into that nicely too. Has the Congress become irrelevant as individual citizens dictate conditions for attending a hearing in the Senate, and the justice law agencies under the executive branch will not provide information for oversight even when ordered? So basically, if you don't have the power, if you kind of saying, there's this, I read a couple years back, a king has subjects, but if the king has no subjects underneath him, is he still a king? No. So they've taken the power away from him. They've taken the power away from Congress. They become irrelevant. Do individuals such as George Soros, large foundation as the Clinton Foundation and big business interests control the government through bribes and intimidation?
Yeah.
Does the media dictate the news or report the news?
Dictates. They all say the same thing.
Has the federal government, DOJ, FBI, intelligence agencies blackmailed individuals through federal charges in order for them to sing or compose to remain free? When you get a judge saying that from the bench, I would say that's pretty much a given. Has the federal government secured our border? How is it possible to have an opioid addiction problem that is prescription-based in our country? Dr. Lee, you want to address that?
Yeah, it's real possible because we have lots of people in my profession who don't practice responsibly. Yet there are physicians who are politically connected who prescribe enormous quantities of opioids who never get on the radar, never are investigated, never are confronted by their board, law enforcement. Yet I'm under constant threat that my records will be audited. We just had an orthopedic group that has about 20 orthopedic surgeons, and a disgruntled former employee who got busted for trafficking gave them a tip, and then they audited them, and there were, you know, one of the things that we do is we keep records, and the state board regulations say that you have to keep records. Every prescription has to be documented, and every prescription should be tied to an encounter. Well, you know, practicing medicine, I can't tell you how many people, friends, nurses, fellow doctors, people I work with in the operating room, hey, I've got a cold, can you call something in for me? And you call in some cough syrup that has some hydrocodone. And 99% of that goes, it's fine. It doesn't lead to any problem. Maybe some of it does. Very rarely would I prescribe a controlled substance in that circumstance. But they got audited. None of these guys were politically connected. Their collective fine from the state started out at $2 million. And then it got whittled down to $900,000. So divide that by 20. They had to all come up with that.
And let me ask you, where do you think that money went to?
That's an interesting question. I think that's a black box, you know, that you don't know where that money goes to. And so, but my point about with this, and there are a substantial number that are politically connected, as Mr. Baugh suggested, and they are part of the corruption problem, and they continue to do what they do.
Number 9, are laws passed to protect us from criminals or to make us criminals to be controlled? I'll get into that in a little bit more depth. Has there been a successful soft coup of the federal government by the deep state, which I've already answered, at least according to me? This points are pretty damning in one respect, but think about this. How many shots were fired in order to accomplish their goals? How many times have you read, when a revolution hits, I've got my rifle and I'll take care of business? Okay. Well,
Back that up a minute. The shots have been fired.
Yeah.
Waco, Ruby Ridge. Look at some of these others in the past. They have fired the shots.
Seth Rich.
Seth Rich.
well, yeah, Seth Rich. I thought about that. I was
I
thinking
believe
from
the shots have been
2000,
fired.
2000 plus. I wasn't thinking, no, Waco, hands down, of people. I've read a book detailing that. Ruby Ridge was it. And whenever Handy says it's not the rank and file of the FBI, I just want to cringe. Yeah, it is.
Same with ATF.
Yes. So the bottom line is, not one of these incidences have been, for the most part, accomplished with firing a shot. I got a comment on this. Yes, sir, armed with your mighty pen, I'm sure you will prevail against those who are reduced to relying on feeble automatic weapons. I look forward to see you lead the charge that will restore freedom armed with that printer of yours. So the first thing I thought about is Sam Culper. I'm not going to give this man any information. He's just trolling, it's fine. And I thought about it, my response was, I think he meant semi-automatic weapons. Only an untrained fool would put their weapon on full auto if it was available in a firefight. Obviously, everybody here knows, probably knows that we do firearms training, rifle training. You see the new improvements we've done for the range. It's not things people need to know, especially in a venue like this. Do I think we're going to come into a firefight? More than likely. What do you think? Going to be hot?
Can't tell when, be prepared for it.
Dalton? So, I'm thinking about today, first thing, what do you, all right, so let's say we agree, whether we do or not, we're going to make an assumption. At some point in the future, if it goes south, if there will be rioting, civil unrest, and shots will be fired. What are you fighting for? And this is why I put this together and I started putting things in. This is why I had Hans to go first and try to say, how many people really, I said earlier, think about common law? Well, you don't. I mean, how many years have you been studying this? 10?
No, not even that. Seriously, after our round table at your dining room about 5 years ago, before that, I knew about Jefferson's statement, but I never pursued it because I wasn't in the solution space. I wasn't trying to figure out a way out of our current problems prior to 5-6 years ago.
So my point is, if you don't know what you're fighting for, just saying I got a rifle, I'm going out and fight, but you're not dedicated to a cause or a goal, you're not going to win. Why were they able to accomplish all these goals? They basically do a soft coup. Well, we financed it first off. A lot of the people supporting them have skin in the game. They get government grants, they get government jobs, they get government checks on welfare, they get government, they basically bought 50% of the people. They are unified, they have a goal. They want to keep getting their money. And when I say their money, that means our money. But if I ask anybody here, what are you fighting for? Tom, what are you fighting for? If you came to a firefight, what would you be fighting for?
Right now, survival.
Survival?
To have the option of doing anything else.
Keeping my stuff.
Keeping your assets?
See, but the opposition has a much larger goal. If we ever get into that kind of a fight, it will be for our own immediate personal survival, which, although that would be the most important thing in the world to us at that time, that's a very short-term goal. Our opposition has the long-term goal of, let's call it world socialism, for lack of another term. And they're committed to that, directly or indirectly, from the very highest all the way down to the very lowest. I think we lack a similar cohesiveness in our commitment.
And that's the point for this whole PATCON. Well, one of the points. You have to start thinking about what you're fighting for. If you're fighting for your assets, I mean, we put all of our assets into this building. I'd walk away in a heartbeat. It's just a physical thing. And more than likely, if we walk away, we take it at some point down the road. But, you know, what are you fighting for?
I think the reason we lack cohesion is because we, people who hold our views as a group, tend to be individualists. And whereas they tend to be collectivists. And you know, Gramsci figured it out. You know, instead of violent overthrow and then propagandizing, you change the cultural landscape, and then your soft coup is a lot easier because people are ready for it.
Maybe we should look at this the other way. If we lose, what have we lost?
Everything.
Liberty for your kids.
What's that?
Liberty for your children.
There you go.
Bingo.
So if we lose, our kids are enslaved even more than they already are. So if somebody says, what are you fighting for? It's easy. I'm fighting for my children's freedom. That's it. If you can't, I'm not saying that has to be your goal or why you fight if you fight. But if we don't have a unified goal and understand what the bottom end point is, we're going to lose. Harry?
As we look around the room, we're all above 30. Speak for yourself. My question is, will our kids fight for themselves? A lot of times I look at world events and I go, well, why are we over there fighting? Why don't those people get up and fight for their own freedoms? And will our children, will this next generation even fight for themselves? I mean, we will.
No,
We'll
hold
fight for
on.
them.
Here's the point. You said it in your speech. We have to set the example. I don't care how old I am. I don't care if I'm 30, I'm 60, I'm breathing, I'm gonna fight for my future kids. I'm gonna fight for freedom. Because the alternative is unacceptable.
Yeah.
It is, it's just unacceptable. All right, I'm not telling you what to fight for. I don't care if I'm fighting for by myself. There's things we have in place in this part of the state or region that have been, I think, very positive and helpful by a long shot. I think God is guiding people to this area. Why are we here today? Number one, where's Peter? All right, on Western Rifle Shooters, how many times have you seen the image? Meat space, baby.
Yes, that's it.
So we're here to meet people. We're here to build relationships, even if they're far away. That's part of what we're here for. I also hope that you learn things here, and we'll have the videos posted, so you can go back and teach and help other people. Because that's what it's all going to come down to. Now, the things that Hans and Tom talked about initially, that's like the setup before the event. I'm going to kind of go over what, again, expanding on their part. The second part of what I consider the PATCON will be solutions. How do you know if an event like this is successful? And we put on a bunch of events in Raleigh. What was successful? If when you're done, people don't want to leave, they want to stay. I mean, we had a bunch of people here last night before we even started. That to me said it's going to be a great event. They're not only not going to leave, they're coming ahead of time. I finally broke it up at 9:30 because I had to get up early for today. Number two, I've been to a lot of Tea Party events and 9/12 group meetings that mainly were a Republican pep rally. And they get everybody mad. Look at what they did. Look at what they did. Everybody gets mad. He said, okay, time to go home. And everybody's mad, torqued up, and that's not a successful event. A successful event is when you go over the issues and you provide solutions. That's a successful event. Another indication of a successful event is when you leave and you think about what you've learned here and what people talked about for the next week, we've got you thinking about things, a successful event. So I'm going to take over Sam's spot. This was supposed to be an intermission, which I put together this morning instead for a talk real quick. I've gone over the central theme for this. But it's like, do we really know what we're fighting for? Well, we talked about that. What were our founding fathers fighting for? Okay, so here's the first question. Who knows why George Washington turned against his lawful government and participated in the Revolution?
Probably to protect his land holdings in the Northwest Territories, which weren't part of the.
Well, I'm not yelling at anybody. Everybody should know this. We see that they've taken our history from us.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true for George Washington, but it was over taxation without representation.
And it's in the book. He fought, we've all heard, no taxation without representation. That's why he fought, but in his own words, why he fought was he paid taxes, but he had no representation in British Parliament. If I pay taxes and I have no say to how that money is spent, I am enslaved, and I am no man's slave. That's why he fought. He said, they will not be able to enslave me. Now, at that point, he was being taxed at 5%, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got a question today. I mean, how many people here feel like they actually have representation?
That was the next question, so thank you.
You led me down the road.
Well, think about it. We're paying literally over 50% in taxes. We are taxed, what was the term, tax farm? Tax farm. We're not individuals. We're just money. They could care less about us. If they listen to us, they would have the wall built. If they listen to us, we have a lot of things that we would not have Obamacare, obviously. Unconstitutional laws are still unconstitutional, and Congress still is upholding it, and so is the president. If they didn't get the idea that the people are not being represented, Trump would never have been elected. But that's not the discussion for today. The central theme is, we've lost the founding principles of our country. These people were ready to give up their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. So central theme. So let me ask you another question. The right to free speech is under which amendment?
First.
Okay. I'm going to ask Lucy. No, you know the answer. I'll ask Jason. How many rights are enumerated in the First Amendment?
Speech, media, I think 3 or 4.
Five.
You got 3? 5? He's figuring it out. You got 4. But think about this. If we don't know our rights under just the First Amendment, how do they take us seriously if we don't know our rights? There is 5. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Now, you could argue that with Islam, it's not a religion, but I think that's pretty much another topic. Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech. I put these in completely from the First Amendment because it's not like we had the right to free speech. I want you to hear the words they said. Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of the press. Social media? Now, they haven't done that, but they're letting it go. Maybe they're just complicit or irrelevant. Congress shall make no law prohibiting the right of the people peaceably to assemble. I can't tell how many times we did protest and that was not the case. Congress shall make no law prohibiting the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's gone. I don't think people realize we were very active when Congress passed the affordable health care that Sunday night all these years ago. There were so many people out there saying kill the bill. They could hear the people outside saying that inside the Congress. They heard that was that many people, but you won't hear that on the news. They don't care about our redress of grievances.
But you still can petition.
I'm glad you said that. Before the Declaration of Independence was adopted, I should say, they would go back for they didn't want to go to war, and it was a big argument about going to war because it was your lawful government. Romans 13. You can't go. Everybody goes, you can't go against the government. Federal government right now in the United States because of Romans 13, and they get on their high horse and stick their nose up in the air. And I said, really? Now, I've got a couple books that debunk that pretty well by biblical scholars, but I said, okay, so then if what you believe is true, then you're still a British subject because they overthrew their legal government against God's will. Of course, then they don't want to hear that. But they were going backward. They did not want to go to war. So they would write a petition. And of course, Parliament and the King would ignore it. So they had another meeting, another tax was put on the colonists. So we need to write a petition. George Washington stood up. Does anybody know what he said? The time for petitions is over. It's time to act. But see, we should know all this stuff. We should know our history. History has been rewritten in our culture by whatever you want to call it, deep state, socialism, communist, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. They won. They won that part of the war.
Battle, not the war.
I think so the question really becomes, did they win the war or they won the battle? I think they've won the war. Now we have to win the second war. Of liberty, then I would say that in the whole plenitude of its extent, it is unobstructed action according to our will. This is a little bit more than what you put on, and I had seen Hans's before, he did it, but I wanted to put more of it up. This is the Rightful Liberty quote he went over today. He went over this, which most people do ignore. And always so when it violates the right of an individual. They don't care about the individuals. We do. We had the same problems that George Washington faced. Individuals. The militia. He said the militias, that he had his army, then he has state militias. He said the militias were like herding cats. So that was what he said. They didn't want to listen to authority, and somebody had to be the central figure and coordinate and consolidate all these different disparate states because they were the individual countries. And they should have, then that was the final intent also. It will be of little avail to the people that the laws are made by men of their own choice, if the laws be so voluminous that they cannot be read, or so incoherent that they cannot be understood. If they be repealed or revised before they are promulgated, or undergo such incessant changes that no man who knows what the law is today can guess what it will be tomorrow, what good is it? Now, I don't know if most people know that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams had a strong dislike of each other. What most people don't know is Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson had a strong dislike of each other. Thomas Jefferson also had a personal feud with Alexander Hamilton, and they each owned their own newspapers. And there was there was an article written, I have it posted on NC Renegade. It goes over how to change the republic to a constitutional monarchy. This is like 1790s. And one is basically to write laws and taxation at 1/3 or 1/10 of 18 this year and then minus this much. Basically, they kept on writing things. You could never figure it out, just so that they could tax you more. This is in the 1790s. It's a very good treatise. It's probably about 2 pages long. I don't know. I've got Lysander Spooner from the Spoonerites. Anybody know what a Spoonerite is?
Spoonerism?
Fran Pareto has written a series of books. He had Spoonerites. And they knew what they were fighting for, and they figured it out, so they left, and this was in the future, they left to colonize other planets. A man is no less a slave because he is allowed to choose a new master once in a term of years. And again, this is a duplication of yours. But think about it. Listen to the reaction when I ask this question. How many here think the people that represent the majority of Congress are honorable men? Anybody going to stand up and defend it? Usually I get an out laugh, everybody just starts laughing. I just got one. That's a sad commentary on our elected officials. It's also a sad commentary on us.
You got some slightly honorable performance from Miss Lindsay the other day. Well, that's the most honorable thing I've seen out of our senators and.
Yes.
Well, I'll give you another joke. She else came in last night. We were talking. I said, I have proof that there's a God. He goes, okay. I said, Lindsey Graham has been. I said, I believe that you can be possessed. I said, Lindsey Graham has been exercised. Now that John McCain is dead, and now he's okay. So it shows that evil can be exercised from anybody.
It's actually he used his inheritance from McCain for gender transformation. He got testicles last week.
See, now I
I heard he.
When was the last time?
The same cancer John McCain had.
Does anybody who here has read George Washington's farewell address? Anybody? Read it. You want to talk about some wisdom? This is just a portion of it. He meant political parties because back then when he was president, there was no political parties. The political parties started with Adams and Jefferson.
You call them factions.
So, in his farewell address, however, political parties may now and then answer popular ends, they are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion.
It's happening now.
Well, that's my point. They knew.
They knew.
We haven't been taught this, and we basically have been indoctrinated, would be the best word I could say.
Because they're used to human nature.
For want of a nail, did you have this? I think you had this up. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. It might have been Fran. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of a rider, the message was lost. For want of a battle, the kingdom was lost. How can anybody ask a question, how can one person do anything? One person may make a difference. I think one person can make a difference.
We hardly know.
All for the want of a horseshoe nail. I would say right now, we're losing because all for the want of a cause or a common goal.
Yeah.
I had done a course here a couple weeks back on Beach Zero Radius, and I wanted to go over, I took 3 slides from that. And this is from Sam Crawford's classes. I said, what I want you to take back from this, I want you to go and make new associations. Notice nobody has a name tag on here, because I want you to go and interact, step out of your comfort zone and meet these new people and make the new connections. What if you have a radio contact? So I'll drop back. Somebody mentioned the three-pronged stool or 3-legged stool. We have a presentation on a 3-legged stool that was done, but I couldn't get Pat to come and do it. Our 3-legged stool, first leg is communications, second leg is intelligence, and the third leg is tactical. Of those 3, which is the most important?
Intelligence.
Communications.
Peter?
I'm gonna go with Intel.
Intelligence.
Drives the other 2. And is
Intelligence.
driven by them.
Yes.
None of them in isolation will suffice.
No, but of the 3, intelligence, which is what Sam teaches, is the most important one. There's a big difference, and this is part of his coursework, there's a big difference between information and intelligence. If you see something and you report it, and you do a salute report, that's information. That is submitted and analyzed by intelligence officers or intelligence analysts into information. That information that has now been transferred into intelligence is given to tactical to plan offensive actions. So without intelligence, tactical is worthless. Does anybody know the story? Does anybody read The Secret Six, Washington's Spy Ring? Really? It's not a, Brian Kilmeade wrote it. It outlines his spy network. And without that spy network, we would have lost the Revolutionary War. The British were coming in, and they were going to wipe him out, and he knew it. And because he had gotten information from his spy network. It was incredible what he did. He went in his tent, and he wrote an outline of orders to attack the British coming in. I think it was Boston. They were bringing in supplies and troops, and if they would have landed, the war would have been done. He outlined the attack from them that he couldn't do. He made it all up, put it on a courier, told that courier, make sure you get caught. And he did, and they read that, and they didn't land. That is the power of information, transferred into intelligence. If he would not have done that one act, we'd still probably be British subjects. But you never know. So, communications is important, obviously, because if you have information, you have to have reliable communication methods to transfer that information. But let's say you live in Florida, correct?
Yes, sir.
I've never met you before today. Let's say I meet you now. We now have a face-to-face meet space, and you have a radio, and now we start communicating on the radio. And I give you information, or you give me information. But now I know you, so now I have some level of confidence that you're a credible source. But if I hadn't met you and you give me information, how do I rate that information? That's why it's important to have these kind of meetings. But the first thing is you have to have the information sources. You've heard of A1 source of information. Well, this is the sources. Completely reliable, usually reliable, fairly, not usually, unreliable. But we have not transferred any information between us, even though we have a communications network developed. We're not in a hot war, or we have transferred any information. So even though I may know you and trust you, if you sent me information, I would pass it along and I would try to verify it. And if it was verified, then your rating goes up. But if somebody, even if I know them, and they're a couple states away and they give me information, I have to make a decision because I don't know really if you're reliable or not for information to transfer into intelligence. Reliability cannot be judged. Pretty much that's where we're at right now. But then you have to rate your accuracy, which is what I'm saying for verifying. So the A1 would be you trust him implicitly and he's given you information in the past and it's been confirmed. We have to get to that point if it goes hot. But in order to do that, and then start taking information that is somewhat trustworthy then to go to intelligence is a big step. Those are your ratings, 1 through 6. Misinformation and deception could be used as valid tools from our side. Cannot be judged. And when I say by our side, I will tell you one of our greatest strengths is the other side gives us no credit for intelligence. I mean mental intelligence. They just think we're deplorable rednecks. Let's use it. Fine. Not you.
That was a genuine.
So your group has to judge reliability. If you haven't talked about it, you probably should. Are your requirements for reliability standardized? Do you have an SOP for that? How much information have you or your group confirmed? Well, right now, pretty much nothing. What do you do with the information? What do you do if you cannot receive information due to faulty comms? Do you test your comms? How do you set up an SOI? Salute report. All right. Paula, give me an example of a noun. Touch something and tell me what it is. Like a table.
Like a table, any kind of chair, table?
Yeah. It's a noun. I can pick it up, I can touch it. Can anybody give me a noun that you can't touch?
Joy.
What's that?
I said joy, he said wisdom.
Freedom.
Anybody else? I call those intangibles. You can't touch them, but they're still important. We've lost touch with our intangibles. My intangibles are wisdom, courage, honor, virtue, morality. You don't think about those as nouns. You can't touch them. We don't live them either. So here's another question. How many people in Congress and Washington have virtue? How many people in Washington DC have morality?
Maybe 5. We can't get there.
Dictionaries don't carry those words.
We may have a common goal, but if we don't have a firm grasp of the intangibles, we're not going to win. With a firm reliance on divine providence. And there's a book over here, The Real George Washington, I'd recommend everybody get and read. There is a lot of paranormal stories in the Revolution that you're not taught, the hand of God working. And you reading in that book some of the things, you just get goosebumps. And you're never taught those things. Thomas Paine, what we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. Freedom. It is dearness only that gives us everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods. And it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. What happened to Thomas Paine? Anybody know?
Died penniless.
He actually won the war, helped win the war. The troops were demoralized. He came in and he wrote his, I think it was this one, the little booklet, and they printed it out and just distributed to the troops, and the morale went through the roof, and they won the next battle because of one man. After the war was won, he went over to England and tried to start a revolution in England. They ran him out into France. France put him in prison. Washington's president, he writes a letter to Washington. He goes, I'm in prison, can you intervene and get me out? What did George Washington say? Rotten hell. Left him to die in prison. It wasn't until Jefferson became president that he sent a ship, one ship over, and rescued him, brought him back. Although he wrote about God, he became a atheist later on. I guess he lost track of his values and purposes. This is an expansion of what Hans said earlier. If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were a countryman. Now, I don't know if you know much about Sam Adams, but he was a revolutionary. I mean, he actually would tar and feather people, and sometimes they died. He was very passionate, even though in this particular case he was basically saying, just leave us in peace. How can you know if you love liberty more if you don't even know what liberty means? Do you know why Ben Franklin was never president?
Naked air baths in the window.
It was a very early version of the Me Too movement. He was a known purveyor of prostitutes.
Oh, yes, he was a womanizer. I guess he was an early version of the Democrats. That's a resume enhancer. He was too old. He was very old when the revolution was finished. But he's very smart. When the people find that they can vote themselves money, that will herald the end of the republic. You've probably seen that before. Doesn't make it any less true. James Madison. Let me ask a question. What was Thomas Jefferson's main contribution to the Constitution?
He wasn't there.
He wasn't there. Anybody know? He wasn't there. He was in, I hate to say it, I think they exiled him to France. He was over in France and did not get a chance to do any input into the Constitution. If he had been here, we'd have a little bit of a different Constitution, especially with the Supreme Court judges. But what he was able to do was convince his friend, who was there, James Madison, to go on the right track. And James Madison was able to institute a lot of features from Thomas Jefferson into the Constitution. Not enough, but some. I'm not going to get into it too deeply, but when John Adams became president and Jefferson was his vice president, and they hated each other, Adams would actually intercept Thomas Jefferson's mail and read it. That's how bad it was. So the President of the United States was basically invading the privacy of the Vice President. He figured it out, so Thomas Jefferson and James Madison wrote a code, and they wrote themselves code, and every summer they redid the code when he went back to Virginia, and that's how they corresponded. That code has never been broken to this day. I wish we could know what they were saying. At least it gave John Adams fits, but what country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. It's James Madison. So if we are resisting, I'm going to use the resist movement now as the other side, let them take arms and restore your freedom. If you haven't read Basquiat, I'd recommend it. It's a little long, but it's worthwhile. Socialism, like the ancient ideas from which it springs, confuses the distinction between government and society. As a result of this, every time we object to a thing being done by government, the socialists conclude that we object to its being done at all. Think about that. You see it a lot. We disapprove of state education, then the socialists say that we are opposed to any education. How many times have you heard, but it's for the children? As our children get dumbed down and indoctrinated and are enslaved with college debt. We object to a state religion, then the socialists say that we want no religion at all. We object to a state-enforced equality, then they say that we are against equality, and so on and so on. It is as if the socialists were to accuse us of not wanting persons to eat because we do not want the state to raise grain. It's over 100 years ago. 140, give or take. The only atheist that I would read, Ayn Rand. The only power any government has is the power to crack down on criminals. Well, when there aren't enough criminals, one has to make them. One declares so many things to be a crime that it becomes impossible for men to live without breaking laws. And the purpose of that is to control us. That's over 50 years ago. You know, and the New York Times is not well respected today.
The failing New York Times.
The failing New York Times. Do you know after the War of Northern Aggression in 1868, who was the candidate for president that the New York Times endorsed? Anybody know?
What year?
1868.
Sherman?
Robert E. Lee? He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't run for president. Think about that. Think about what we've been told versus what the reality was back then.
I didn't know that.
A union that can only be maintained by swords and bayonets has no charm for me. If the union is dissolved and government disrupted, I shall return to my native state and share the miseries of my people. In saving defense, will draw my sword on none. You don't want war. Nobody in the South wanted war. They just wanted their freedom. That's why I'll never call it the Civil War. It's always the War of Northern Aggression. I'm going to make the assumption everybody here has read Atlas Shrugged. I've read it multiple times. Probably need to read it again because it's been a couple of years. So in here, to refresh your memory, Hank Rearden had developed his Rearden medal. And Dr. Farratt's one of the bad people. trying to make an analogy today, but there's just too many to pick from. Do you really think we want those laws observed, said Dr. Ferris? We want them to be broken. You'd better get it straight that it's not a bunch of boys we're up against. We're after power and we mean it. There's no way to rule innocent men. The only power any government has is the power to crack down on criminals. But when there aren't enough criminals, one makes one. One declares so many things to be a crime that it becomes impossible for men to live without breaking laws. Who wants a nation of law-abiding citizens? You can't control us. What's there in that for anyone but just pass the kind of laws that can neither be observed nor enforced or objectively interpreted, and you create a nation of lawbreakers, and then you cash in on guilt. Now that's the system, Mr. Reardon, that's the game, and once you understand it, you'll be much easier to deal with. We do control you. 65 years ago, give or take, 70? Boston lawyer Harvey Silvergate, author of 3 Felonies a Day, How the Feds Target the Innocent, estimates that the average American now unknowingly commits 3 felonies a day thanks to an overabundance of vague laws that render otherwise innocent activity illegal and an inclination on the part of prosecutors to reject the idea that there can't be a crime without criminal intent. Think about this versus what was talked about in the first 2 lectures. I'll give credit to Hans for this. I never heard of U.S. debt clock. We had done our first town hall, and he came up to me and says, I want to do a presentation. Remember that?
Yeah, and the
Go
people
ahead.
there were really good. They managed to get online and get that up on the screen.
And he got this up, and it was the first time I'd seen it. What was it at that point, 7 trillion?
Yeah.
If you haven't seen usdebtclock.org, do not go there with a full stomach. This is about 3 weeks ago. Debt per citizen.
I
Debt
was just
per
going to say, when you're
citizen.
looking at it in real time, it's staggering how fast the numbers are winding up. That's a
I'm
freeze.
surprised you got a clear image on the U.S. national debt on the last 6.
Oh, I did a screenshot and just took it. But think about this: $21.46 trillion in debt.
That's not the worst number on the page.
No, they're coming up. What does that mean? That means your children are slaves.
Deficit is.
And why are they slaves? Because they indebted them. And where did that money go to? And I read an article this a couple of days back where everybody's saying how great Trump is and the Trump economy and we have all this growth. And they took the growth, GDP growth, and they had put in the new debt that was printed, and he said, we're actually going down. I said, we didn't go up, we're still going down. It's just smoke and mirrors, which is what your talk would be part of. Debt per citizen. 65, no, citizen, let's define citizen. Legal citizen. Legal, legal breathing citizen. $65,000. Debt per taxpayer, $176,000. Let's just move on. Okay. So the total debt per citizen with the other things added in, $216,000. Total debt per family, $847,000. That's what each family is in debt to. You never pay it off. Only way it's ever going to go away is either they seize all your assets, devalue the dollar, or you become a revolutionary and reset the government. U.S. unfunded liabilities. Can you read that?
No, it's over it.
$114 trillion.
That's a conservative estimate, by the way. Some estimates are above 200 trillion.
And I believe they were 200 trillion. The liability per taxpayer, not family, not per taxpayer, $940,000, almost $1 million. This is why they said, we're gonna give everybody, we're just gonna give everybody $20,000. Because they know that the money's worthless and everybody's gonna say, they're just buying you're buying your chains. JP?
Who do we owe that money to? Who is that debt to?
Xi Jinping.
Are you gonna go over that? Who do we owe that money to? Are you gonna go over that tomorrow?
No, I mean, I can kind of break it down now.
Go ahead.
Some of it, a lot of it is intergovernmental. When the U.S. uses Social Security to fund the government, they give them an IOU. A fair amount of it is out there somewhere, either in the hands of foreign entities, U.S. institutional and individual investors. I think the intergovernmental is about 25%, and that's not considered debt owed to the public. All the rest is considered debt owed to the public, the 75%. So, you know, a breakdown, probably 15, 16 trillion, foreign entities, domestic entities, individuals, pension plans, what have you, and then the other 4 to 5 trillion, is debt issued to like Social Security.
So is there a real possibility that debt can be called? I mean,
Oh, there's call.
what are the rules? Like, it has to be, you know, when does it stop, I guess, is the
When the market decides it's worthless, when the market starts, and
because it's not real money anyway, and a lot of it, it's
none of it's real money.
right.
I mean, anything that is somebody's debt cannot be real money. I wrote a piece on my blog, Straight Line Logic, called Real Money, and I went into all that. So if you want to check that out, but no, none of it's real money. It's all IOU. That green stuff in your wallet's an IOU. It says Federal Reserve note.
Sure.
It's a funny kind of note. It doesn't pay interest. It doesn't have a maturity.
Right.
And the only thing that
It allows us to trade.
the only thing you can redeem it for is another Federal Reserve note. So, yeah, I mean, there is no real money in the sense that anything's backed by anything. It's all a bunch of IOUs.
The other thing is that every dollar created has to have a dollar of debt to create the dollar, so it's literally impossible to pay it off. Because that's what banking is. It's the consistent and constant inflation of the money supply. And banking doesn't work unless it's constantly expanding. So if you pay off a debt, you're deleveraging, you're taking that dollar out of society. Banking doesn't work like that. That's why the most evil of the evil of the evil is the central bankers.
Some of this will be part of Bob's speech tomorrow.
What it really is, banking cartel.
Yeah.
European banking cartel.
Yep.
Can I say one other thing? How much money do central bankers have to get started? If you go to the bank and get a loan for
You mean the
$200,000.
Central Bank of the United States?
Yeah, or my point is, they don't have money. They create money out of thin air and enslave the people.
Because we allow it.
Because we allow it.
Here's a question for you. If the dollar becomes worthless and the stock market crashes, how many other countries' central banks will go bankrupt?
They all would.
You understand?
I mean, the way our financial system is set up, it rests on debt. Your debt to me is my asset. My debt to her is her asset. As soon as, and we saw this in 2008, this is exactly what happened. All of a sudden, the housing market quits going up and it goes down. All the securitizations, all the mortgages, all the securitizations and mortgages are no longer worth what they say on whoever owns the book. So the loss there translates into the creditor's loss. Everything's interlinked. So, and that's why it went global so quickly. If you, and I was gonna mention this in my talk tomorrow, but if you want to see something that I think popular culture that does a pretty good job of explaining how it all works, download Michael Short's movie, The Big Short, or read the book. He has a pretty good handle on what happens.
And the bad thing about that, I encourage everybody to read it when you, or watch it. The Big Short, when they knew it was going down, they covered it up. How long did they cover it up for?
As long as they could, because as soon as somebody in a position to know says, you know, we got a lot of assets on our books. We got them valued at $100 million. They're worth about 60 or 50. Everybody says, well, I'm gonna sell you short. And it just cascades. That's why it can take years and years and years to blow up these balloons. But what, the stock market topped October 2007. A year later, Lehman goes under. Bottom of the market's 2009. So you're talking about 18 months, the whole thing falls apart. That's why it falls apart so much faster. That's why people who say, well, I'll see it coming and I'll have a chance to get out. No, you won't. You didn't do it in 2008. You didn't do it in 2009. You won't do it when it happens. It will happen. But, you know, I'm not going to give my talk now, so.
I think this is the last slide for this portion of it. U.S. domestic gross, or the GDP, it's up 114%. Looks pretty good. $20.5 trillion. That's pretty good economy. But then when you put in over 21 trillion in debt, it doesn't look all that good, does it? I could probably find it. I posted, it was a Bill Whittle video about 5 or 6 years ago. How to pay off the government debt. Did anybody ever see that? You probably saw it. And they went through and he said, well, all these big corporations have to pay their fair share. So they said, we're going to take every penny that the corporations, the top 50 make, and we're going to confiscate every penny, not the profit, all of what they did this year. And that gets us to like February 26th.
Our corporation doesn't make money.
Well, it depends which set of books you're looking at.
No, we structure our books so we don't make money.
Well, they went through and he said basically what they say for their profits, for their stock price. And he said, we're going to tax this, we're going to tax this, and he said, well, that gets us to March 2nd. And they get all the way to finally they just did everything. They took everything they could, and it got until I think February or December 22nd. And hey, there was nothing left to do. So they basically taxed everybody in the country an extra $1,400, and they had no debt that year. And he goes, phew. Now it's January 1st. We have nothing. We have nothing left to tax, to steal. Exactly.
There used to be a number up on that debt clock that was total domestic assets. I don't remember seeing it though.
Ooh.
Now, is that pension plans and what?
Domestic assets, I don't know if what he's referring to is assets supposedly owned by the government or assets owned by us all. And you gotta remember the asset side is valued in nominal dollars. Okay, all you need is, I mean, stock wealth right now is huge because we're close to an all-time high. Stock market goes down 50%, your assets go down 50%, but the liabilities don't change.
What I used the number for was
That's like you were talking about last night.
The debt versus the assets. The assets was always a smaller number than the debt number, so there's no way you could pay off the debt by rating everything in the country.
Oh, no, you certainly can't.
Right.
So if you took all the assets, if you sold everything, if the government came in and took everything and just took it and sold it to China or whomever, we still couldn't pay off the debt.
And that doesn't count the stuff they're gonna pilfer along the way. You know, if you give them more money, they're gonna mess up more money, so.
There's never enough money for the government.
Right.
Everybody knows the Declaration of Independence. Anybody here anybody ever know about the Virginia Declaration of Rights? adopted a month earlier.
That was Tommy J's work too, right?
Oh, yeah, you can tell right off. This isn't the whole thing, but you can see the commonality. That all men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights of which when they enter into a state of society, they cannot by any compact deprive or divest their posterity, namely the enjoyment of life, liberty, with the means of acquiring and possessing property, and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. The original Declaration of Independence was life, liberty, and property. And that's what they wanted. That was the intent. Do you know why they didn't do that and why it was changed? Slavery. It was a big argument. Slavery's evil, hands down. They should have addressed it back then. It would have saved a lot of lives and a lot of aggravation, money, blood, and treasure. But they got this is what it should have been. And they even got equally right instead of equal. Patrick Henry, if we would be free, if we mean to hold inviolate those inestimable privileges for which we have so long contended, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble cause for which we have so long endured, and to which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon, until the glorious object of our contest should be obtained, then we must fight. I repeat, sir, we must fight. A call to arms and appeal to the God of hosts is all we have left. They knew what they were fighting for. If we could come and get everybody to agree on what we're fighting for, they wouldn't have a chance. This is the last part. It's the last paragraph of Robert Gore's book, The Golden Pinnacle. And it just became ingrained into me. Memories last longer than monuments was the epitaph on the tombstone. Public virtue, knowing what you really are fighting for. You're not fighting for yourself. You're not fighting for assets. You're fighting for, and you're fighting that when you're gone, people remember you fondly. That's what it's really worth. Not monuments and how much you made or how much you stole with the Clinton Foundation. And we laugh, but it's a sad state of affairs.